Welcome everyone to another univirtual experience event here in ALTSPACE. We are doing more than 160 events in approximately 19 platforms, and we are on the 20th of 30 days. So we still have lots of events to happen and lots of platforms for you to check out. So for right now, I know you're dying to get this started, this Voodoo, World Building Voodoo event with Karnivore. So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank a couple of sponsors. These kinds of things, these events are free for you to attend, and that doesn't happen without a lot of support from sponsors and from volunteers. So I want to start by saying a huge shout out and thank you to HP. HP Virtual Reality and HP Higher Education are our Infinity sponsors. Now, you might have heard they just released the new edition of the HP Reverb G2 that is perfectly designed for higher ed with pulse and eye monitoring and testing, and other innovations excellent for precision controls, research, and development. You really want to check out about this device and what they're doing with education. You can check out educatorsinvr.com. That's the Educators in VR website, educatorsinvr.com. Or you could head over to hp.com, and check for HP Virtual Reality and HP Higher Education. Just want to also include our Galaxy sponsors, Engage VR. There's been some mind-blowing experiences over there, so please check the calendar. And Advantis Education is sponsoring the awesome Euphoria nightclub that Educators in VR very own world builder Mark has built just specially for you guys. So you want to check. There's still events in that space on the calendar. So now I'm not going to take up any more time. It's over to you, Karnivore.
Awesome. Thank you, Donna. Thanks, everybody. Man, oh, is this Thursday? Wow. So, yeah, we've got today I'm going to be talking about how to do animation and sound in Unity and how to put those effects into your template and the importance of putting those effects into your templates or objects. You can put them into your objects, whatever. First, I want to mention my Discord for anybody who hasn't already joined our Discord. I'm posting the slides every day. As soon as the videos become available, I'm going to be posting the videos of these events, and as well as taking your questions, talking about things that didn't quite make it into the actual workshop. Because I tell you, I thought about another hour worth of material just on materials yesterday after the event, because there's so much I didn't even get around to talking about. But we can talk about all that stuff in the Discord. And there's two different ways to get into the Discord. You can discord.me/Karnivore, or you've got this obnoxious looking URL you can try and copy down, whichever way you prefer. And this invite is good for the rest of this week. I guess if you want to get in next week, I can create another one. But and then next Friday, you guys are going to do all the work because we're going to take a tour of the worlds you've been building, hopefully inspired by the things that I'm showing you and the ideas that I'm trying to give you. I don't want to present this like my way is the only way of building worlds or creating these sorts of effects in AltSpace. People seem to dig what I do, so I think maybe I've got something going. But there's a dozen ways of doing everything in computer graphics and 3D modeling and game development. My way is just one of them. So I want to start off by talking about sound. Getting a little ahead of myself here. You need two different components in your world, in any Unity-based game, really, in order for sound to work, in order for sound to be made in a game application. You need the audio source, which, as the name implies, that is where the audio is coming from. And that audio source can be everywhere at once, or it can come from a specific point. I can use what they call spatialized audio that makes it sound like it's coming from a single point, and I can control how far that sound radiates. So if I want to do something like a radio or a TV or something small that's emitting sound, I could do something like that. The other thing that is required is an audio listener, and normally that is attached to the camera. So if I've I'm working with Unity here, and this is just a default scene, and it starts off with a camera. So when I start a new scene in Unity, it gives me a camera, gives me a directional light, gives me this nice, very boring looking skybox, and that camera comes with an audio listener. That's your electronic ears. As it moves around through the space, as it gets closer to different audio sources, then it's going to pick up more of that audio. And if that audio is spatialized, like it's coming from a 3D point, then I'll hear it coming from either my left or my right ear, depending on which one is closer to the source of the sound. Unity really has a problem if there's more than one audio listener in a scene. Now in ALTSPACE, we've already got a camera and we've already got an audio listener. It's attached to our avatars. And that's why they don't let us put cameras in the templates, because not only will it mess up your view when you go into the world if there's another camera in there and that camera is just trying to render to whatever, you won't be able to hear anything if there's two audio listeners, or what you hear will be really scrambled and confused. They'll be fighting with each other. So that is another reason why we're not allowed to take cameras into ALTSPACE through our templates. But for purposes of this exercise, I'm going to keep using this one. So I've got my camera, and I can put an audio source in here. And the audio source has a position. It's got a transform. It's a game object, just like everything else. And then I need to give it a sound. And I've got a collection of sound clips that I've been collecting. This project is House of Karn, by the way. We're going to be taking a look at a lot of the stuff that's going on in House of Karn. I'm trying to... Oh, that's the sound I used for the meat grinder at the end. Okay, that'll work. So I take my sound, I drop it into the audio clip there. Now an audio source can get its audio from a bunch of different places, but most of the time you want to put your audio clips into the actual project and attach them like this directly. I'm going to set it to loop and then play on awake. And I'll give it a 3D pan, or a spatial blend rather. I'm not sure how well this effect is going to come out through the web projector, but as the audio source moves around from one side of the camera to the other, the stereo shift, I guess is probably the best way to describe it, shifts from one side to the other. But now I think I really am getting ahead of myself. So I was just looking at that audio source component, right? All audio sources in Unity have to have one of these, right? And depending on what I want the sound to do, if I want it to play as an environmental sound or I want it to play as a localized spatial sound, I need to set that up in this game object component here. So if I want it to play on awake, I check play on awake, and that will, as the name implies, it'll make it play when it wakes up. Now, normally that's going to be when the world loads. That's when this awake event happens, and all of these things start happening when the world loads. As we're going to see in a little bit, though, I can control when something wakes up through an animation. So I can leave this unchecked, and then I have an animation later on that's moving things around, and it's also maybe turning sounds on. Is something that I can do in an animation. So you may or may not want to play it on awake. Loop will play once, it'll play over and over, but if it's not checked, it'll play once. And if I have play on awake checked, but loop unchecked, I probably will never hear that sound because it will be done playing by the time my avatar actually gets into the space. So if you try to put a sound or something into your world and it doesn't give any problems, but you don't ever hear it, it's possible that you have it set to play on awake, but you don't have it set to loop. So it's done playing by the time you get into the space. Um, Priority, volume, and pitch. You can use that to adjust the volume and the overall pitch of the sound. Stereo blend is the thing that you want to set if you want it to sound like it's coming from a particular point. I don't know why they put this as a slider. It's been a slider forever, but I think in my mind it should just be a checkbox, but whatever. The other thing that you want to be careful of, because it's particular to ALTSPACE, is this volume roll off. So that defines how this volume sort of fades, right? The range at which it is loudest and the range at which I can no longer hear it. And in this example right here, I've got a max distance of 100, so that if I'm standing right next to whatever the sound is, it's going to be at its full volume. And at 100 units away, it has drifted off to nothing. But I have to set this as a linear roll off, which real sound doesn't work in a linear roll off, right? This is the virtual part of the virtual reality, is that sound doesn't actually fall off in a linear fall off like this. But I have to use a linear roll off if I want it to go all the way to 0, because if I use a logarithmic roll off or any other kind of custom roll off, it's that volume drop never gets all the way down to 0. I'll still always be able to hear that sound everywhere in the world if I use a logarithm, anything other than a linear roll off. I'll always be able to hear it somewhere in the world, even if very faintly. Yeah, so I've already talked about the two different types of sound, the two different uses of sounds. If I have an environmental sound, it's like wind rustling or music in a store, or I don't know. Those are two good examples of what an environmental sound. Or if you go to the Aurora world, that little mystical, harmonious, twinkly ambient sound effect that's playing everywhere in the world. That's an environmental sound. It's inescapable. It's ubiquitous. A spatial sound has a source. It also has a range. You can avoid it. You can escape it. And I like to use spatial sounds in a lot of my worlds to control where people can have conversations. Like I've got one we were in the other day where there's a big fire, huge fire. If you're standing too close to the fire, the sound of the fire is too loud to have a conversation. But if you just back off just a little bit, then you can get away from the sound and have a decent conversation. The same thing in a lot of my other worlds, like the Ghostbusters world. It's really, really loud. It's really, really noisy, except for this one little spot. There's a gazebo right next to the lake where there's no sound. Every once in a while, you may hear Slimer when it goes by, but I put that in there and I designed the sounds so that there would be this gap in all of the spheres where you can get away, and there's no sound in this one little spot. It's pretty cool.
Karn, do you want to let me know when whenever you're ready to take a question?
This is a great time to take a question.
Perfect. Our gold star attendee for Universal, Rami, is up.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning.
I remember when we used to go to city stores that we can choose what to listen. Is it possible in our space to have a place where the user or the user can switch maybe from one sound to one sound and switch the sound, and the sound start when I hit that button maybe, and it's for just few meters around me. The other people don't. So similar that when you put the headphones and listen, little a track.
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, you could do that. You could do now. That would require writing an MRE, right? As soon as you do something like push a button, right? As soon as you use push a button to describe anything. Now we're automatically talking about MREs. But with MREs, you could do that and a whole lot more, right? You could have like a record store that goes in, and I push the button. If I'm standing close enough to the button to push it, I'll be the only one that can hear it, and it plays that track. And maybe a picture of the album cover comes up and whatever. Yeah, that's a completely doable. That's a completely
Okay.
doable thing.
Similar
Thanks
to
for
the
Rami.
I'm sorry.
Rami, sorry, we have
Yes,
so
yes.
many questions today. We'll just keep it to that,
Okay.
okay?
Wow,
Sorry,
lots of
Rami.
questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Richard, I'm going to amplify your voice.
All right, thank you. So my question is around the environmental sounds. If you
Mhm.
have something that is continuous, I've noticed that there's always a little gap in between the end of the clip and the starting of the same clip again. Any way to avoid that? Besides making a very long looping thing in Audacity or something else like that itself.
Okay, so you
But can
you broke up during the middle part of that question. I
right.
think you're talking about a sound that loops, but the end is different from the beginning. Is that right?
Basically, it's like an environmental sound. So it's like a hum or the sound of the wind or something like that.
Right.
But I want to have it continuous playing, basically, without interruptions. But when I put it on a loop, there's always a little sort of half second gap in between the different loops.
Well, I'll tell you what I do for stuff like that. I know exactly what you're talking about, and I'm actually going to show you something that's really cool on the web. So probably the easiest way to find it is to go to Google and Google up the BBC audio library. The BBC has put all of their sound effects from the past, I don't know, 50, 60 years online, and they're free for use for non-commercial purposes. Everything. So this is where I go first to get a lot of my sounds, and I'll look for an environmental sound, like it could be machinery or a hum or typewriters clacking or something like what you were describing. I'll get this sound and then I'll take it into Premiere, and I'll just trim out like 8 seconds of it. And that 8-second clip, when I download from BBC, maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes long. I don't need 2 minutes of that, especially if it's going to be just a loopant, constant white noise kind of thing. And then I'll trim that down to as small as I can, because these sound files also add weight to the world. And that's what I loop, is like a tiny 3 or 4 second clip. When we look at the House of Karn here in a little bit, you're going to hear a heartbeat that is continuous and ubiquitous throughout the entire space. It's one heartbeat cycle, just a single boom that loops over and over and over. Does that help?
Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks,
All
Richard.
right.
That's a great question. Dragoness, you're up next.
Yeah, hi. Okay. Sometimes I've noticed that the audio can be adjusted in the menu, like under environment volume or effects volume.
Yep.
But
Yep.
sometimes there seems to be no way to adjust the volume. Do you know what causes that difference?
I'm really not sure when I'm not sure what audio AltSpace considers like environmental or UI or case in point, the web projector. I'm not sure exactly where that audio signal is coming from. So sometimes we have a hard time sharing sound or not sharing sound. It's a difficult thing. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Dragoness. Okay, last question for this session, for this part is Trey. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I was trying to pay attention to when you was editing the audio, how you actually did that. So how do I added an audio clip to my assets. So, and then I tried to click on it when I want the audio clip, but it wasn't showing up. It says I have no clips.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure without looking at your asset folder and seeing what you're working with. That's a hard one to answer. When I look at the audio clips, they look like this in my assets folder. And one thing I should mention, if I'm going to use an audio clip as a like a spatial sound, right? It's coming from an object. I want it to set it to force to mono. Right.
Okay,
So
so
it
does
only
it have
plays
to
in.
be a like just I have an MP3.
Yeah, MP3 should work.
Okay. There's somebody.
Yeah.
You have no idea why it's not showing up.
No, I don't. Look in your console and see if you're getting any error messages.
Okay.
Because if it is in the asset folder and it tries to import it and runs into some sort of issue, that's where it's going to show up. You'll see an error message in the console. Outside of that, I'm once again I'm stumped. Wow, I'm only 1 for 3 this morning. This is awful. Okay, any more questions?
So not for
Doesn't look
right
like it.
now. I'll let you know when the
All right.
queue's going back, when we have a queue again, okay?
Okay, so moving on from sound, and I want to get this. I got a bunch of stuff I want to go through pretty quick. Yeah, this is a clever slide, but it doesn't. It's really useless. So, what kind of things can be animated? I can animate transforms. I can animate the positions, the rotations, the scales of my object. And unlike the ALTSPACE World Builder, I can change my scales non-uniformly. So I can animate something growing or shrinking or getting wider or rotating around. You ever been in a nightclub and seen the laser beams, the cones of the laser beams as they sweep from side to side and they grow and they shrink and they go all over the place? This is what they're doing. They have the pivot at the end where the source of the laser beam is, and they're just rotating that around and animating the scale of that object. It's really cool. It's a really cool effect. I can animate material parameters. So I can animate how opaque something is, or I can animate the color of a particular material. I can animate real-time lights, which are that's also practically useless in ALTSPACE. But yeah, if I had a real-time light, I could animate the color, or I can animate the position or the intensity of that light. I can also animate game object enable states. So when I'm looking at my hierarchy, let's say I've got this audio source and just turn it off, right? It's grayed out in my hierarchy. It's not going to affect anything in my scene, but it does go into ALTSPACE. If it's in my hierarchy, if it's in my scene, it gets bundled and built into the template or the object, and it gets uploaded with everything else. I can turn that on with an animation. So I can have an animation somewhere in my scene, or maybe attached directly to that audio source. And when it turns on, or when I trigger that state in the animation will play if it's set to play on awake. I can animate hierarchies or children relationships of different objects. So if I have an animation attached to a parent object and it's got a bunch of child objects under it, those objects can even have their own animations on them. And this parent object has an animation that can control all the children. So that's how complex animations and complex rigged models are animated. If you see something, say, off of Mixamo, and it's got a character model, and it's got a walk cycle, and a shoot cycle, and all the different aim state animation clips that a character would have, all of those are transferable from one model to another, so long as that model has the same hierarchy. So most character models have a 64 bone, what they call a skeleton, right? And if I have an animation, say a zombie crawl and attack animation, I can make my Disney princess character do that same animation if they have the same hierarchical skeleton. So that's another property of animations. I can take an animation and I can move it from one set of game objects and attach it to another set of game objects. And as long as those game objects have the same hierarchy, the animation is going to be able to play. It's really used to be a lot more difficult in game development to do animations, but being able to do that where I can work just on the animation and it doesn't matter what character I apply that animation to, really opened the doors for indie game developers. And then, of course, model files can have the animation baked into it. So I can do the animation in my model in something like Blender or 3D Studio, and that animation is going to be baked into the model, and I don't have to worry about doing that animation when I get it into, say, Unity. If you saw the thing last night we did about Agrabah, or if you've ever seen the tiger cave that comes up out of the ground and talks, that tiger cave was animated in 3D Studio Max, is how you get those mesh deformations and the things changing shape, and that's how that's done. Unity doesn't really have the tools to do that kind of animation. So what things can't be animated? It's a real short list of things that can't be animated. And that's where you really start having a lot of fun with animation, is playing around with, oh, can I animate this? Look at that, I can. I can't change the skybox with an animation. That's something I could write a shader for the skybox that changes. But that's different than me actually using an animation to change the skybox in any meaningful way. I can't change the ambient light after it's been baked. So that's something that can't be animated. Naturally, ALTSPACE's camera, that's off limits. And then data sources like the textures and sound files, I can't change those with an animation. So if I have an audio source, for instance, and it's playing the sound, say, of a campfire, I can't, through an animation, change the sound file in that audio source to anything other than a campfire. What I can do is I can put two audio sources in there, and I can animate the volume, or I can animate the fall off, or I can animate all sorts of things about that sound and just swap out one sound file for another, but I can't animate a change in the actual sound file that I'm using. And there's also different types of events that I can't animate. And that's really the only limiting factor. I can't animate, say, like a trigger being pushed or something like that. I can't animate anything that would require the interaction of an avatar, is what I mean. So when there's a few components that I have to have on my game objects when I'm setting them up to use as an animation. They need an animator component, right? That animator component has to have an animator controller, which is a file in the asset folder. And then that animator controller plays clips and manages transitions between those clips. So this is the way animations are sort of structured, and the control structure in Unity for controlling animation. Fortunately, Unity sets a lot of this up for you. So let's say I come over here and I've got a simple little arrangement in this scene. I've got a cube. Under that cube, I have an empty game object called pivot. Under my pivot, I have a sphere, and I can move my sphere out here. My sphere also has a child that's an empty game object called, another one called pivot. And then this pivot has another child that's called cylinder. And I'll put cylinder over here. This window is the animation window, and if I'm doing a lot with animation, I might as well just keep it open. And am I getting too far ahead of my slides? No, not yet. So we'll talk about this, how to work this in detail here in a minute. But to begin animating cube, which is the object I have selected, create an animator and an animation clip. Boom. I go to create. It's going to ask me to give it a name, which I'll give it a name. And it does everything else, right? So by creating that animation on this cube, it's added to the cube an animator, and it's already created an animation controller that it put in the folder that I selected called animations. So I don't actually have to do, I only have to do that one thing to actually start this whole process. Unity will create the other things that I need to create to just do a simple animation. If I look at an animation, say one that I get off of the asset store, I can trim the clip with this by looking at the properties here. I see the name of the clip is Mixamo.com, which that's where I got the animation from. Which Mixamo, it's still online, and you can still get free models and free animations from them. But Mixamo itself got bought by Adobe a while back, and it's now Adobe Fuse, which is an awesome tool. But Mixamo is still there, and they still have a bunch of, they have a pretty good collection of free animations and free character clips. And if I want this clip to loop over and over, just like with a sound file, I can loop an animation clip, right? But just like with a sound file, if the end of that animation doesn't match up well with the beginning of that animation, I'm going to see a jump or a stutter or something like this. So a lot of times what I can do is I can come in and I can trim either the beginning or the end of that that animation clip until I find a pair of frames where they do match up. And Unity will actually tell me when the match is good. I'll see like a red flag down here that tells me that they don't match up well. But I can move the the beginning and the end point of that clip until I find a set that does match up well, and that red light will turn green, and I know that my animation will play smoothly. So here's the this is the animation controller, and it controls the different clips. So when I create a clip, an animation clip, then that is just one, I guess, one cycle, right? So in a character animation, I may have a walk cycle, a die cycle, a shoot cycle, a get hit cycle, a look confused cycle, and the controller determines which one of those clips gets played, and in what order those clips get played. I can have transitions that go from one to the other, and by default, these transitions will just when the first clip plays, when it gets to the end of that clip, it will just transition to the next clip. In a full throttled game development environment, not something that I'm building for AltSpace, I can have scripts that affect these transitions, and I can write logic that determines when these clips would play, and create a pretty elaborate state machine in this animation controller for controlling the characters under certain situations. However, no scripts in AltSpace, so not even much point learning about that because you'll never be able to access the controller through scripts. So animations are done with keyframes. You can think of an animation as actually like a film strip, like a 3D film strip. It's not a fluid thing. It's discrete slices of time that are in displayed very, very quickly, and they're controlled by key states. So I start my animation by saying, well, on one frame, I want this state to be like this, and then 2.5 seconds later, or whatever arbitrary time later, I want it to look like this, and I can set keyframes at those two states, and the computer will figure out what the in-between states look like as it goes from one keyframe to the other. Then all I have to do is move these keyframes around or make these changes at these keyframes, and the computer will handle all the tweening as I make those changes. And we could take a look at an example of that. So I've got my animator for my cube here. And this is what they call my dope sheet. I see these numbers they start off, that first range is 1 second, right? So it gives me a 1 second animation, and I'm zooming out until I get, so here's 15 seconds, make about a 15-second animation. I hit the record button, and now any changes that I make will show up as red And I'm just going to do a couple of little quick things. Notice as soon as I make that rotation, I set the time on the animator timeline. And I've got the record button, and any change that I make, the interface is showing me where those changes are taking place by coloring them with these red sort of indicators. If I'm not recording, that's going to be blue, and that also tells me that I'm on a keyframe. So I've got a keyframe at 0, which is the start of the animation. My next keyframe is at 15 seconds. If I press play, I can see this animation play out. And I've only animated the pivots. I haven't animated the sphere or the cylinder, but because it's a parent-child relationship, the child gets dragged along whenever the parent moves. Something else to notice about this. Notice how it starts off moving slowly, and then as it gets over here, it's moving quicker. And then as it gets back to its start position, it slows down until it gets back to where it started. To understand what's going on with that, I have to look at something a little bit different. So this is my dope sheet, and dope sheet is an old animator term. It back when they were planning out, Bugs Bunny and Woody Woodpecker, they used a dope sheet that looked an awful lot like one of these to plan their animation out. But if I come down here and I click on curves, I can see the curve for that animation. Wow, this really isn't a good example. Look how tall that is. It's nutso. All right, so that's not going to demonstrate exactly what I wanted to do. So a curve actually shows you the acceleration of the animation as it goes out of one state and goes into another state. If I come back over here to the dope sheet, though, what I want to do almost all the time is change the tangents on these, which if that curve sheet had shown me anything reasonably, I could have shown you what the tangents look like. If you've ever done any vector art, you'll recognize the terms curve and tangents, because it really is a spline that Unity's drawing and using to control that acceleration. But if I select the keyframes that I want and right click on them and go to both tangents and set it to linear, then I won't get that acceleration, and the rotation will be constant all the way through that entire cycle. So it won't speed up halfway through the cycle and slow down again near the end. And I get a nice, consistent looping. That's way too long. There we go. Now we get to see the effect a little bit better. There's no skip, there's no slowdown at the end of the cycle. It just loops over nicely. The other option that I have, constant, is good if I want to flip things on and off. That means it's going to stay at what value. There won't be any tweening. It'll stay at whatever value is set by the previous keyframe until it hits the next keyframe. And that's great if I want something that instantly changes, like flipping on like a switch or something like that. That's when I would want a constant approach through that animation cycle. Ooh, I'm almost out of time. Okay. Okay, dope sheets. Yeah, we talked about dope sheets, and they can be really complicated. This is especially in something like what I'm about to show you. This is a better representation of what the curves look like, right? And I can go into my curve editor and I can grab these control points, and just like I'm working with a vector spline in something like Illustrator, I can control that speed, that acceleration, that rate of change by modifying the shape of these curves here. And I rarely try to get anything done with the curves. If I'm at a point where this is the only way I can figure out how to achieve a particular effect, I am desperate. That's let's see. Okay, I've already talked about that.
We've got a question.
Question. Give me a question.
Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, hey. Just about animations, and I would like to ask if you have anything in mind for kit objects, for example, in comparison to the, let's say, normal environment objects that we are delivering into ALTSPACE. Are you aware if there are any limitations in animation on kit objects?
No, no, everything that I'm talking about for templates should work for kit objects as well.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything should, because I don't think there's anything that I can, aside from baked lighting and static lighting effects, there's nothing I can put into a template that I can't also put into a kit.
Okay.
All right, another question.
Steven, I'm giving you can amplify your voice now. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to know, are grabbable objects possible? An object that you can pick up, walk around with, and set down in a different place?
Well, I was going to say yes until you got right to the end of that question. So yeah, any object that I bring in as a kit, I can flag it as being grabbable in the world building tool, and I will be able to pick it up, and I'll be able to hold it around, and I'll be able to throw it. Depending on whether or not it's got colliders and the thing I set it on has colliders, I may or may not be able to set it on something. But as soon as it leaves my hand a few seconds later, it's going to go poof and go back to where it was. But that's something you can do with pretty much any kit object, is make it interactable like that.
Okay, that's it for the moment.
Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is, all right, so this is the House of Karn. It's the Unity project for the entire thing. And I'm going to give you sort of a director's cut of it, or maybe a director's commentary as it plays. I have a camera that's got an audio controller, so I'm going to be moving it around through the set so that the camera can hear the audio that's going on. So a couple of things I'll mention, there's colliders and there's stuff that moves through the entire space to push people through the rooms, right? To get people moving out of the rooms. And if somebody gets stuck or they get caught in a corner, or they try to fight the collider, it's going to spit them out and they'll land in this box down here, where they've been told you've fallen victim to the house. And there's another one of them over here. So there's really no place to escape the map. I didn't want people, just falling out and then, respawning back in. I wanted them, there should be some consequence, I felt. All right. Inside of almost every room, if you remember from the material conversation we had the other day, in almost every room, I have an invisible plane. Well, it starts off invisible, right? But that's just because of the transparency effect from the material that I've got applied to it, that I put in front of the walls. All of the lighting in here is baked. So when I'm changing the lighting in some of these rooms, I'm actually just modifying this material that I've got on this plane that covers every wall. All right, so
I've got a question for you, Blueberry. Go ahead. Sorry about my dog.
Go ahead, Blueberry.
I don't have time to put my headphones on. I'm sorry. I'm on 2D. I could put them on. It might shoot me off though. I just wanted to ask, is there a way to be able to have no lighting, like turn the lighting completely off? Like, so if there's a movie on, for example? I've never seen that.
I don't think there isn't a way for me to control the lighting once it's been baked. But what I can do is I can put something else in front of that object, and that's kind of what I'm doing here. Is I'm using other quads, other planes that I've placed in there, and I can make that darker through a material effect and make it look like I'm changing the lighting. But if I'm using baked lighting, there's no way to change that once it's been baked. You can get a similar effect with, non-static kit objects and real-time lights, but it's not going to look good.
Thanks,
All right.
Blueberry.
So as it starts off, the character, the avatars drop into here, and you can see the audio sources and you can see all the lights. I've also left the temporary actors I was talking about yesterday back in. So these are static cubes that I use while I'm baking the lighting. And then once the lighting is done, I take them out. But I left them in so that you guys could see where they are. Audio source on the piano only plays once, 30 seconds in. Now, the thing about this is an 11-minute and 6-second long experience, 666 seconds. So I have to plan out, 20 seconds in, I expect people to be in here. 30 seconds in, I need people to go into this next room over here. So I plan when things happen. I've got this animated material effect. And as it's playing, I can actually see the tiling and the offset values change. I hope this isn't too loud for you guys. So now I give you a few seconds in this room, and the doors all have an audio source on them too that play when the doors open. And I do that so that, oh, and here's the zombie that's got kind of an elaborate controller setup. So it comes in, it plays one animation, plays another animation, and then it loops back and forth between those two. And there he is doing the thriller dance. And he scares you for a little bit and he dances for you. Now, when every door opens, it plays this one audio source of a door squeaking. So that's sort of like your cue to move on into the next space when you hear the door open. Because not long after that, something's going to come through and push you out.
哇，这样开会呢，老板。我给你看看这些人，老板。老板不是你个手机开着的。
I could probably take a question if you guys...
Yep, go ahead. David's ready for you.
Okay. This thing gets used a lot too. So he comes up, chases you down this hall. You're supposed to run down the hall, and then here comes this collider, and you saw it rise up out of the floor. It's going to come down, and if you haven't gotten out of the hallway by then it's going to push you out. This room, I give you a little bit of a break. It doesn't, there's not as many sounds going on in here. And then there was the effect where you can even see the gap between the lighting panel and the wall panel right here. Yeah, so you can see the wall that's got the lighting on it is still there, and just that other invisible cube comes up to darken the room. And I had real-time, I wish I had real-time shadows. Look at the shadows on the walls in here. And then if you haven't gotten out of this room by now, here comes the collider that's going to come in and sweep you through. And I've angled it so that it should push you towards the door. All of the colliders are really designed to push you towards the door. I don't really have it to the point yet where you can come into the space and simply not move, and you'd be able to make it all the way to the end, but that was kind of what I was going for. I wasn't exactly successful with that. And we can see the dope sheet down here is changing every time I select something. These are all the keyframes for this entire animation for everything that's moving. This door is a fake. It doesn't go anywhere.
Does David still have a question?
There is another hand raised up. Who's got a question?
It's okay. I'm just giving him. Go ahead, L8.
Oh.
I'll toggle it for you in case you're having trouble. Here, I've turned it on again.
And then when you come in this room, I'm actually, I'm really kind of proud of this. So I've got a mesh collider and I've got a rigid body. The rigid body is what adds something to the physics interaction. If I've got a collider and I've got a rigid body on it, then Unity is going to try and make it a physics object. It'll make it roll or make it fall or whatever. And I'm animating the this rigid body to make the floor pieces fall out. So before they fall, they'll actually hold you up. But one by one, they fall out, and you fall down into the spider cave. Or have the lovely bone spiders.
LA, do you want to try your question again? Are we getting your voice?
So the bone spiders all have their own sort of local ambient sound, or it's not ambient, it's a local spatial sound that moves with them as they chase you through this tunnel. And just like with everything else in the house, I have another collider, except this one looks like a cobweb, that will come through, and it should sweep you out of that tunnel if you get stuck in there and you can't move. But most of the time it's going to squeeze you out and you'll fall into the box below.
Try it again, L8. I'm sorry, if you want to, I'm Donna T. If you want to send me your question in writing, we can pass it along, or okay. Sorry about the mic. K-Bot, do you want to try? I've just amped your voice.
Yeah, I was just wondering, would it be possible at some point to just maybe look at a door and how you set up one of the doors?
Sure. There's not enough time left to play through the whole thing. Sorry. So I'll just go straight and show you how I set up one of the doors. I actually have all of the doors are grouped together into under one parent object that has all of the animations in it. So the door itself has, I have the door and a pivot that the door can, notice I've got the origin of the door down here in the corner. So as I rotate the door, it's gonna swing on that hinge. And the animation controls both the state of the audio source and whether or not it plays, as well as the swing of the door.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, great.
Have we got any other questions?
Thanks.
Yeah.
Nope, that's it for now.
All right. Well, let's see if I think I've pretty much made it to the end of my, a couple other things I want to say. Yeah. No two people are going to see these animations the same when they come into your spaces. All right. That's because the animations play when the avatar loads. All these avatars load at a different time. So the animations are not going to be synchronized across everybody else in the space. This animated object I've got over here with the Earth and the Sun and the Moon, nobody, well, I don't want to say nobody because it's quite likely that a few of you do see it all in the same space. But I promise you they're not seeing it on exactly the same frame. That's just a statistical impossibility. Everybody sees it moving. And everybody, sees it doing its thing. And if you stand down next to it, the Earth has got a collider on it. It will push you around, but everybody else will see you moving without really any apparent need or reason to, especially if the Earth is, up here by the balcony for them. So some people are going to see it down here. Some people, we're not going to see it in the same way. You need an MRE to do that. With an MRE, I can create synchronized animations and bring in synchronized animations. If your object is set to static, it will not animate, even if I've got an animator on it, even if it's got an animation. And I press play and I watch it go. But when I get it into ALTSPACE, it just sits there. It's probably because I've got it set to static, or it's possibly because I got it set to static. Static objects won't animation. Yeah, and if I want to get everybody sort of reset or get everybody synced up as close as I can reset the space, and that will sync up the animations for everybody in the room to a certain extent. It's not going to be perfect, but it'll get close. But if somebody comes in later, they're going to be out of sync. Or if somebody leaves and comes back, they're going to be out of sync. Okay, any more questions? Oh, there's a hand raise.
Getting there. Okay, you are amplified. Go ahead. I'm going to turn it off and turn it on one more time, but you should get a message that says, ask you to unmute. So if you're able to unmute yourself. Okay, send me the question. Oh, I think we can hear you now. Go ahead. I apologize. Sometimes these things fail. Send me, I'll ask the question, send it to me in a message. Okay, Donna McTee. Laurel, I'm going to give you the mic.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, Mark, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, we're almost out of time. If we can carry the conversation over on Discord, if you want to get on the Discord server and ask these questions.
Absolutely. I would like to know if we're building worlds for this amazing week-long workshop. How do we share them with you? Get in the showcase.
You can post them on the Discord is where I'd like to see them. I have a channel up there for you to share links. You can share them with me personally. Mark Gill 47 is my ALTSPACE username. So send me a friend request and share your world with me is another good way. Are there any other ways? That's you could
But the key is that I assume you're going to have a hub with the teleporters to go to each of the worlds in the showcase.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. So yeah.
So
if you send me
I think it's important that everyone needs to know that they need to make their universe public, that their showcase world, the universe has to be public and the world needs to be public. It's helpful if it's listed as well, but it needs to be public or no one will be able to visit it. And once you have a link, then it doesn't have to be shared. All you have to do is visit it, grab the teleporter, put it in the hub.
Yep. But if you want to show it off next week, I need it by Thursday at the latest. Because Friday morning we're going into it.
Okay, so we've got our last question. Chuck, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Super duper. Yeah, this has been an incredible series, and I'm looking forward to seeing what other people create. Question is, in animation, what if you just have kind of like an animated GIF, or GIF, where you've got 10 or 15 images, basically a very short video. Is it basically just an elaboration of you've already showed us, or do you have to drag them, separate them out and drop them in and add keyframes? I mean, what's the easiest way to do that?
Oh, so an animated GIF is yeah, and I'm from the side of the river that says GIF. An animated GIF is a series of frames, right? And it works a little bit differently than like an animation in Unity. You probably, and I don't know if animated GIFs even work in Unity. You're probably your best bet would be to take that GIF and turn it into what they call a sprite sheet, not a sprite sheet. Oh, the term has left my head. I don't know. There's a graphic that's an arrangement of different frames, and I can take a particle system. I can have a particle material that steps through those frames and plays it like an animation. That's kind of like a GIF. I could also turn it into a video because Unity can play videos as textures and materials. So I can convert it into just like an MP4 is actually probably going to perform better and look better than an animated GIF. But at its heart, GIFs are completely different from the kind of animation that we're doing in Unity.
Okay, great question,
Okay.
Chuck. Thank you so much. So that brings
Thanks,
us
Chuck.
to the end of the questions.
All right, and the end of the event too. It looks like. Thanks
Okay.
everybody for showing up, and thanks Donna for being a wonderful host. This has been a great week. I've really
It has
enjoyed it.
been, right? Oh my gosh. So thanks to Educators in VR and Virtual World Society for coming up with this amazing concept for running this over 30 days. And these events have been so resource rich. So I think we all feel that about the Voodoo series. So thank you. I'll just close by just acknowledging a few sponsors. And so we've mentioned HP, so HP virtual reality and HP higher education, Engage VR and Advantis Education. You're going to check those out. And I just want to mention a few stellar sponsors as well. Grove XR, it's an educational learning platform. Now, Dr. Angelina Dayton is the founder of Students in VR, and they have such great programming for students and for parents of students. So you want to check those out on the calendar. Frame VR, a WebXR browser-based social educational program. You can find it at framevr.io. LearnBright, another educational platform that if you haven't checked it out, take a minute. You'll find them at learnbright.com. Then there's LBX Immersive and Waking Dream XR that are new sponsors that came on after they saw what was happening with Univirtual and asked if they could support in any way. So we're so excited to have them as sponsors. Myself, I'm Donna McTee. I operate under Let's Meet in VR. I do a lot of work with educators in VR, and it's just been my absolute pleasure to connect with speakers, to do the flow of the conference. And last but not least, I just want to say that you guys, we get to rewatch. You get to watch videos of sessions that you missed. You get to rewatch some that there was so much information like this one, right? You want to rewatch it to catch all the information that Mark's given you. So a huge thanks to Tony Cube Studios. Huge thanks to the moderators and the filmers that Tony Cube Studios has been working with volunteer filmers to record these. And then we have moderators in the room for all these events. We're so grateful to everyone. So thank you so much for coming. We look forward to seeing you at the next one. And I'm going to now say this event is officially over.